Hello, and welcome to Hope for Felons podcast, where we discuss felons and everything in between. Your host for this show is Douglas Van Vliet. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Hope for Felons. It's good to have y'all on the show with us today as we discuss felons and everything in between. I did want to say that if you have any questions you would like us to answer in our next podcast, please email us at questions@hopeforfelons.com, and we will do our best to answer them on the next podcast. Today we have a returning guest on the show, and I know you will enjoy him as we did before. And we want to go ahead and start the show by welcoming an ex-inmate. Welcome to the show.
Hi, well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Today we're going to take a little bit of time, not too long, because we don't know how much time we'll actually be able to have. But I do have a few questions, and I know me and you had talked prior to the podcast, and you did have some stuff you wanted to share. And I think one of them was, how did you feel prior to leaving prison, especially as far as being accepted back into the community and be given that second chance? How did you feel?
Well, prior to actually leaving the facility, because as I had stated in one of our previous interviews, I was incarcerated for a little over 16 years. So, needless to say, I was very concerned about being back out into the community. I didn't know if I would even be employable any longer with a felony record, and the advances in technology alone that I had not been able to experience. I figured I would be coming out into a foreign world. But fortunately, the experience has been a lot better than expected.
So actually, how do you feel now that you're out and about, as far as being accepted within the community and them treating you good?
Well, in reality, I actually feel like a human again.
That's good.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I had debated whether or not to even choose going to a halfway house prior to leaving, but it actually is a good thing. I've met several people. The job coordinator here was able to send me on a job. The people there basically welcomed me with open arms. They told me from the beginning that they were not concerned with my, prior situation, that they feel that everyone deserves a second chance, and that they were happy to have me there. So that helped right away. It was not what I had expected upon release. I thought it would be very hectic trying to find employment, but the place that I work for, they have done quite a bit of collaboration with the halfway house and giving people that second chance that they need. So
that is really good, because so many people coming out, they feel like they're not going to have that second chance, so they immediately don't give it a chance and they just go back to what they was doing prior to incarceration.
Exactly. And I can honestly say even people that I work with that know that I'm actually at a halfway house, they've been very accepting. They have judged me on the person that I am, not the person that I was. And it's been an eye-opener, but I am happy to say in my situation that it has been a very good experience so far.
Well, I know that at the time, because we communicated right as soon as you could communicate, and it seems like you have done so well, getting everything together, and, it's amazing to me how when a person comes out, they get themselves together so quick, which that's what you have to do. You can't wait till the last minute and try to, do anything. But another question I wanted to ask was, we had touched a little bit on it in our last podcast. We was talking about the halfway house in general. And I was going to ask you, do you feel like the halfway house has been a challenge for you?
Mentally, yes, but that was more so prior to arrival, because I didn't know what to expect. Now that I'm here and I've taken all of the steps that are required of me, I'm glad to say that it's been very smooth sailing. So, they have definitely been a help. I would recommend halfway houses to anyone that's out there. I know there's a lot of fear of the unknown. I experienced that for months on end and agonized over the decision to do it or not. But I truly believe that I did make the right decision.
Well, I believe you did too. I mean, like we talked about before, a lot of the unknowns, and then, there is going to be issues that come up, and you're going to get aggravated about it. I mean, just like, you having that issue with your tooth and trying to get a dentist appointment. I mean,
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff I know bothers you, and it would me if I was in that type of situation. But obstacles like that will come, but, you have to be patient because we're talking about the BOP.
Exactly. And I can say that the staff here at the halfway house, when, for our listeners that don't know the backstory, I had a tooth filled at the prison facility that I was at, about probably 5.5, maybe even 6 years ago. The dentist put a temporary filling in the tooth and then was supposed to reschedule me for a permanent filling. Unfortunately, that never occurred. So this entire time, I've only had the temporary filling. Well, not too long after being at the halfway house and enjoying outside food for once, I bit into an item and it split the temporary filling right in half, which then has my tooth split in half. I immediately reported it to the staff at the halfway house. Unfortunately, my case manager, which is the person that would schedule any type of medical procedures that are deemed non-emergency, she had left for the day. This occurred on a Friday, so she wasn't returning until Monday morning. So the staff left a message for her to let her know what had occurred. And that Monday, she submitted the paperwork, which I'm assuming is via email. That part I'm unclear of. But she submitted that Monday morning when she came in. So unfortunately, then it became in the hands of the BOP. And that's been probably 2 or so weeks ago, I would guess, at this point. And we have still not heard anything back. But the case manager has notified the BOP again, trying to get an answer from them. So, at least, as I said, on the halfway house level, they did everything they could in an extremely timely manner. So, now I'm waiting to get that taken care of, dealing with tooth pain, but there again, that's one of the obstacles with dealing with the BOP, and unfortunately, you have to have patience and just hope that it doesn't become more serious until they can fix it.
Exactly. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, what all do you have to go through to get your driver's license when you're released from prison?
Okay, the very first thing that the DMV will ask you for is your Social Security card. So please, if you have a loved one that's getting close to release, make sure that they see their case managers so that they can order that Social Security card for them so that they'll have it when they go. Because if not, the DMV basically will turn you away until you have that identification. So, I was able, right now I have a state ID card. I've not gone to get the actual driver's license yet, but with the halfway house, and I'm assuming that this is every halfway house. I could be wrong, and if I am, I apologize. But at least in my case here, they actually provided me with a letter from the halfway house that on letterhead and so forth that actually waives your fees in obtaining your state ID and or driver's license, since you are still quote unquote in custody. So I was actually able to get my state ID for free. And
that
all I had,
good.
Yeah, I was surprised. I didn't even know that that was an option. I just assumed that I would be responsible for the fees. But once, at least the state that I am in South Carolina, their policy is if you have not had an active driver's license for over 10 years, then you must take the knowledge test again and take the driving skills test again before you can get your license. So
and probably another good thing would be as well is for these people that's being released is to try to contact the DMV and make sure they do not have any outstanding tickets or anything, because that's what happened to me, and I got caught up and I had to go pay before I could even get my driver's license reinstated.
Exactly, and as you and I have spoken before, I'm kind of in that same scenario now as well, where I had prior tickets that were actually paid, reinstatement fees were paid, but when I contacted the DMV to make sure that everything was clear so that when I was ready to obtain my license, I wouldn't have an issue, I was told by them that they show outstanding payment on the tickets and the reinstatement fees. So that's yet another obstacle to cross. So the sooner that you can obtain any information on your driving record, the better, because it sounds as though that's a rather common issue with state DMVs, that they still show, when it's old records, they still show that you owe everything that you've already paid. And unfortunately, you may have to pay all of that again. But, you know, you just kind of have to swallow that pill and do what you need to do, you know, to obtain the driver's license, because
exactly,
you have to have one. So they kind of have you by the neck.
They do,
so to speak.
Now, at the halfway house, if a person goes to the halfway house and they do get their driver's license, are they able to obtain a car and keep it there?
Yes. There are some forms that have to be filled out. Now, there again, this is at least specific to the halfway house I'm at. I don't know how others operate. But there are forms that you fill out. You need to show a valid driver's license, proof of insurance, provide a 10-year driving record. Then if you have a vehicle, provide proof of ownership, proof of insurance, of course, for the vehicle, and then you're allowed to have your car on property. Make sure that registration and all that, of course, is current. All your licenses are paid up. And then you're allowed to use your car to go to work, or, you know, shopping passes or anything like that, just like you would if you were walking or on a bus. So, but you do have to turn your keys in when you come in, and they have a lock box that they store all of the keys to the vehicles in.
Well, I have heard too that in some halfway houses they actually will have, like, one of the staff members would actually search the vehicle at time to time, you know, where they want them to open up the trunk and open up the vehicle just so they can look through it. They don't really look in depth, but they just look, make sure that there's nothing that's not supposed to be in there.
Mm-hmm. I believe that holds true here as well. Since I don't even have a driver's license, obviously I do not have a vehicle, so I haven't paid that close of attention to the procedures as far as that goes. But I believe it's like any other bit of property you have, that can be searched, you know, at any time that a staff feels like they need to. But there were a couple of people here that had vehicles. They have actually since left to go either to home detention, or they maxed out and went home, period. But I never heard them complain about their car being searched or, you know, anything obtrusive like that. So I'm assuming that never occurred with them.
Well, it may not, like I said, it may just be, you know, because like we've discussed several other times, that every halfway house does things different. Some are more laxed and some are more harder. You know, it really all depends what the situation is.
Exactly, and a lot has to do with the individual person as well. You know, if you're one of these people that try to sidestep the rules and are always causing issues, of course you're going to be subjected to more procedures than someone that is really using the halfway house as they should, as a vehicle to re-enter society. And follow the rules. I've been here now, for a month and a couple of weeks, I believe. And so far, I have had no issues whatsoever.
That's really good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Now, one thing we was talking, because we was trying to do another show, but we didn't get it finished, but one of the questions that I wanted to bring up was, if you don't mind, give us a little bit about, your background in prison and how your experience was, because everybody has a different experience. Of course, we was talking earlier about that one guy that's just hateful towards everybody. Well, somebody like that is not going to have a good experience. But knowing you, the length of time I have, I know that it hasn't been really bad, but I mean, the amount of time that they give you is what's worse.
Hey, most definitely. As far as my individual experience, I was very fortunate that I really had no major issues with my incarceration, other than the length of time, of course, and being away from family and friends. But within the institution, in 16 years may have gotten into 3 or 4 arguments, if you could even say that. They were more just disagreements with other inmates. But I was never one of those to try to be in other people's business and see, what's going on and, what's this one doing and that one doing. Basically stayed to myself and a small group of friends and did what I was supposed to. I didn't try to, dip and dive around the rules. And obviously there were probably some rules I broke over the years. I'm not a saint, but nothing outrageous. And so I was able to get along with varying groups of people within the inmate population and the staff. Everyone always seemed to show me respect because I showed them respect. And that's really, it sounds cliche, but that's really the key to prison, is the good old, as your parents taught you as a kid, treat others as you would like to be treated.
Exactly. And I know that, one of the things for somebody that may be listening to the show that might be headed to prison to serve a prison sentence, I know one of the things you did to keep busy was you learned to crochet.
Correct. And I also, after learning how to do that, I don't want to say mastering it, but to toot my own horn, I was pretty good, but it was something I enjoyed.
Better than me.
I also taught myself to knit and to cross stitch as well. And that kind of helped keep me grounded. It was always an escape. If I was stressed out or something, I could always turn to that, put some music on in my headphones, and just kind of forget, for lack of a better term, what was going on around me. So I would highly recommend for people that are getting ready to start their sentence, find something you like to do. If it's drawing, if it's card making, if it's crocheting, if it's just reading a book, if it's working out, find what works for you to be able to de-stress. It really goes a long way, because if you're stressed out the entire time, it can have health risks. It can alienate you from other people, because if you're miserable, no one wants to be around that.
Exactly.
And I mean, everyone's going to get down at some point in their incarceration. It's human nature. But try to find a healthy outlet for when those times happen so that you can keep your sanity.
I have to agree, because it was, I've done everything. I learned how to do card making from Corleone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just learned how to do different things, and I learned crocheting from you. And I think you're far the best, and you're even better than Mom when it comes to crocheting. But
well, thank you.
But
she has me beat on him. She has me beat on embroidery.
Well, that's a machine. But I'm really glad that, you was able to pick something up and do it, because it makes your time so much easier, because when you don't really have nothing to do, which that's the majority of the time, there's nothing really to do. And, and to be able to pick something up and be able to work on it really goes a long ways, and you really get your mind off of a lot of other stuff too, because we're always worried about home, and we're worried about our families and stuff, and, so I do understand that. It's very, very important, when you know you're going to be going to prison, to have a few of these situations, far as getting something to do, whether it be card making, whatever it may be. There's so much that's available, and I know that in some areas they also have ceramics. Some people like ceramics. Some people, depending. You just have to go to the what do they call it? Recreation. Does it all?
Recreation.
Yeah.
And,
recreation department.
Right. And even if you don't necessarily have a hobby you like, I know prisons offer classes in various things, various subjects. They're called ACE classes, which stands for Adult Continuing Education. Some may sound silly, and it may or may not be something that you would use once you get out, but it is another outlet to get your mind off of things. So even if you take a few classes while you're there, they're easy classes. It's not like they're teaching you brain surgery or anything, but it's something else to keep your mind occupied, keep your mind fresh.
Now, that's one of the things I was going to ask you about, because so many people, while they're in, they keep saying, the classes won't do them any good when they get out. It's just a piece of paper. But really, folks, you're not doing it really for other people. You're doing it for yourself, to better yourself.
Exactly. And contrary to popular belief, they actually will benefit you when you get out, for the fact that is one of the areas that the probation officers look at in your file. Growing up, you always heard, this is going to go on your permanent record. Well, in prison, you pretty much have a permanent record that follows you. Probation officers, when you come to them, when you are released, they will look at your jacket prior to your arrival in their office, and they'll see what you did. And if they see classes that you have completed, if they see different programming that you have done while you're there, different hobby craft programs, recreation classes, then they will look at you differently than if you walk in there and all your jacket has is arrived on X day, released on X day. Because then they start thinking, well, okay, what did this individual do that entire time other than sit in the housing unit and watch television? What did they do to try to prepare themselves for coming out? And from the looks of it, it looks as though they did not care whatsoever. They did not do anything to try to improve themselves. So therefore, I'm going to have to watch them a lot more closely now that they're out. But
exactly.
if they have someone that shows on that file where they tried to receive more education, they tried to do this, they tried to do that, then the probation officer starts thinking, okay, so this individual really has tried to turn themselves around as much as they can while incarcerated. They must have a pretty level head on their shoulders. So I probably am not going to have too much of a problem with them. And
Very
it
true.
will make it a lot easier. When I met with my probation officer, that was one of the first things that she mentioned to me was in my file, the 2.5 or 3 pages worth of classes that I had taken over the years. She specifically mentioned that she had noticed that I had not spent my time just sitting around, and that she was impressed with what I had done, and that really goes a long way with her.
Well, that's really good. That's good for the people to know, if you're headed that way, to make sure that, you get involved and you take the classes, and, it will give you a good outcome, when you come back out to the community. So I would encourage everybody that goes in to actually, take that time and do the classes. One last question that I had for you is, it's always been a myth, I think, but a lot of people ask the question, so I'm going to ask you.
I can see where this one's going. Go ahead.
A lot of people ask, going to prison, will they actually get raped? That's been the biggest thing that I hear that people want to know is, and I see it every day online where people's asking the question about it. And so I thought I'd let you explain that a little.
Okay. And, making light of it, but it is a valid question. It is a valid concern. On television, in movies, you always see the worst case scenario of prison life. And I'm sure that that's done on purpose to help scare people so that they fly the straight and narrow and are never in a prison situation. And I'm sure, unfortunately, that does occur in some prisons. However, where I was, I never even had a hint of anything like that occurring. And I am openly gay, so in theory, I would have been a huge target in that area. But I never had anyone even come at me in a weird manner or anything. Again, I've never heard of that occurring to anyone at the facility I was at. They do have, what's the word I'm looking for? It's called PREA, which is the Prison Rape Elimination Act. And the prisons take that very seriously. If there's even a hint of impropriety, they will immediately remove the individuals that are in question so that a full investigation can be done and action taken accordingly to keep everyone safe. We did have one situation right before I left that I will mention, but it was an individual that got angry at another person and accused them of rape. It was completely unfounded, and they did, after investigation, find out that it was just a case of someone angry at another person and trying to get them locked up and out of the prison and into another one. But they took it completely serious, and they immediately removed both individuals into separate secured areas until they could find out what was going on. So the prisons do take that very, very seriously. But there again, unfortunately, it was all a made-up situation in that case. But in 16 years, that was the only time that I had ever heard of anything like that even being enacted.
Well, that's really good. I mean, that's good to know, and even for our listeners, I believe that, that may be facing it, that, maybe it will make them feel more comfortable, about going to prison, which nobody wants to go, but you have to go. So at least you know that more than likely you will not be in that position. And as long as you, one of the things I know is, basically trying to make sure you do stuff the right way and don't, carry yourself like you should, like you did on the street,
Exactly.
so to speak. But one of the things that's totally different. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. While it popped into my head, another quote unquote safety net within the PREA Act is, say for instance, you have raped someone. It has been investigated. It has been proven that you did. The Bureau of Prisons are actually obligated to notify your emergency contacts and so forth that are on your file as to the situation. So I think that in itself has probably put a big kibosh on that occurring, because no one wants to be there and all of a sudden their wife, their children, grandchildren, whatever, get a phone call from the prison saying, oh, by the way, just to notify you, but your husband is now in custody because he raped a fellow inmate.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that is part of that enactment, that they notify outside sources, and it also is an outside punishable by law offense, to where you would go back to court, you would go in front of a judge and jury, and could get some serious time added on to what you are already doing.
Yeah, that's never good.
No, definitely not. So
that's never good.
No.
Well, it's really good to have you back on the show with us today, and I know we'll be trying to get some more questions and stuff lined up, because I know next week you have a long weekend, so
yes.
maybe we can have a chance to do some. So if you have anything you believe our listeners would benefit from, just jot them down, and we'll discuss them on our next podcast. And now, like I said, we do have an email set up, which is questions@hopeforfelons.com. You can email us any questions you have, and we would be glad, if we can, to answer those for you. So until next time, this is Doug, and there is hope for a felon.